Welcome to Boomer Being. Today we're going to discuss finances, boomer finances. We're very fortunate to have Greg McLaughlin of Sentinel Financial with us today. Greg was recently named a 2012 Boston 5-Star Wealth Manager by Boston Magazine. He's also the proud recipient of the 40 Under 40 Award, which recognizes 40 men and women under the age of 40 for professional accomplishments, civic engagement, and leadership. Welcome, Greg.
Thanks, Leslie.
Great to have you.
Likewise.
I'm sure our audience would like to hear a little more about you.
Sure. Maybe to start personally, I am married to my wife, Kristen, and her and I have a lovely 18-month-old daughter, Stella. From a professional standpoint, I'd say I'm a little bit of a throwback in regards to I graduated from Bentley College in 1999, and I'll be celebrating my 13-year anniversary, this coming September, which I think is a little unique for my generation. And actually one of my associates, Eileen Holzman, is from the Andover community here, and her and I both professionally actually partner on a few different initiatives, and one of them is, geared towards educational workshops, and covering a lot of details that are really catered towards boomers, Leslie, and we'll probably dive into those topics in a little bit more detail today. I think when you think about our firm, and Eileen and myself particularly, people choose to work with us because we're caring, dedicated professionals, and we really focus on building relationships, built on trust. And I know our clients know that means that we'll invest all the time necessary to make sure that they really, identify their true goals and intentions in life, and equally as important, reduce the complexity of the decision-making process and the really simple and effective solutions. The real benefit is the feelings that they have, knowing that they can transform all their good intentions, into the appropriate actions.
Excellent. The market has never been as volatile, and the world has never been as global as it is right now. What do you say to people who are basically sitting on the sidelines and not investing?
I'd say there's probably a two-part answer, and part one is easier said than done for sure. That's remove emotions as much as possible. Every time I speak with a client, we always have two very important components: finances and emotions. And they're the two most important components when it comes to making a financial decision. And actually the finances is pretty simple. Spend less than you make, save for a rainy day, and invest for the future. The emotions, as we know, are what complicate things. And frankly, in today's world, it's even more complicated when you take the impact that media has on things. For example, if you had me here 3 years ago, March of 2009, the market for the second time in a dramatic loss, as you recall. The Dow was just over 6,500, and here we are almost 3 years and a couple months later, and it's more than doubled. But if you and I walk down the streets of Andover today or any other community around here, people don't feel that way. They don't feel positive about things. They're not upbeat about the future. And actually, Dalbar, which is a financial research firm, Leslie, confirms this. They show, because of the emotions of fear and greed, that the average investor actually lags the economy almost year to year. For those people who are actually sitting on the sidelines and they have cash, and there's a lot of people out there, we really encourage people to work closely with their financial professional and make sure, one, that it's appropriate for them to invest and it aligns with their goals and intentions. And if that is the case, we definitely encourage that they take advantage of a strategy called dollar cost averaging. What this allows people to do is, instead of jumping into the pool with 2 feet or doing a cannonball, it allows you to dip your foot in the water and eventually get into the pool. So people can align with picking a strategy that's maybe 6 months or maybe even as long as 18 or 24 months. So we certainly encourage that as a strategy for all of our clients to take advantage of.
Some excellent points.
Thanks.
What about timing the market?
Timing is definitely something you want to avoid. History shows that it's tough for two reasons. One, first off, is when do you get in? And the second part, equally as important, is when do you get out of the market? Not too long ago, if you look back to last fall, Leslie, last summer the S&P downgraded the U.S. government. And going into August and September, the U.S. market did not really have a great time. Going into the fourth quarter, people generally weren't real optimistic, and people had struggles as they got their third quarter statements. Yet October of last year was one of the best markets in the U.S. economy in the last 25 years. Who would have thunk it? So it's really important that you make sure that you really stick with diversification when it comes to your overall strategy.
Does diversification work as a strategy?
Yeah, it definitely does, and I know we get this question a lot, and I know in 2008 and 2009 there really wasn't any place to hide, frankly. If you were diversified, I think it helped things a little bit, but it was tough. It was a challenging time frame. When we talk about diversification, I think the big picture we look at, what's your breakdown between stocks and fixed income and cash alternatives. When we focus on stocks, we want to make sure that you're properly allocated between large cap and mid cap and small cap. We also want to make sure that if it's appropriate that you have proper exposure to foreign markets, both developed countries and emerging markets. We also really highlight for many people that they don't have overexposure to one individual stock. We oftentimes see this when people have maybe stock options through their employer, or maybe they've been with a company for a long period of time, or maybe it was a stock that their grandparents had and then their parents had and now they've inherited. But we want to make sure that we don't have too much exposure to one individual company. On the fixed income side, now we're looking at more what's your breakdown between mortgage-backed securities and corporate bonds, government bonds, and maybe high-yield bonds. As you can see, Leslie, there's a fair amount of moving parts to these things, and we really encourage people to work with their financial professional to make sure that they have the plan that works best for them. Regardless, one of the strategies we really encourage people to take advantage of is rebalancing their portfolio. Most employer-sponsored plans will allow you to do this systematically. Good news, no human involvement. You can pick a time frame of maybe every 3 months or 6 months or maybe at least once a year. So that you have invested the time with your professional to set up a strategy, you want to make sure that it monitors itself and stays in line over the long haul.
A lot to learn.
Yeah.
So, are there any other pointers for diversifying wisely?
Yeah, I think when you get into the nuts and bolts of figuring that out and how to put together diversification, again, similar to what we talked about, big picture, stocks, bonds, cash and cash alternatives. For a number of different people, we also want to look at maybe they should consider the use of commodities or other alternative investments, because this will allow them to give a little bit more stability to their portfolio over a long term. I want to be clear that this does not guarantee that they won't lose money or there won't be times when they lose money, but it definitely provides more stability to their portfolio over a period of time. Additionally, one of the things that this allows investors to do as they think about their portfolio is they know that they're not overweighted towards a specific segment of the market or a specific individual stock. So that if that particular segment happens to take a hit, it really allows them to give less volatility to their portfolio.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
So I have to ask at this point, what is the number one question you get from baby boomers?
I guess it's a statement to start, which then ultimately unfolds into a question. The number one statement is, Greg, and it usually goes something like this: we've worked hard to accumulate what we have, and maybe they still have some years to accumulate, and we're going to continue to do that. We just want to make sure that the money that we have lasts as long as we do.
Sure.
And that's really the statement that begins. And that really yields itself to the question, which is, Greg, how much can we take out each month, each year, so that we know that we have as good a chance as possible of that coming true? And that really goes down to withdrawal rates, Leslie. And research shows that for investors and retirees that are withdrawing maybe 4 to 5% of their portfolio on a year-to-year basis, it's certainly a reasonable rate, and it gives them a pretty good chance at having long-term success in their retirement plan. Where we definitely see challenges is where you see people who are withdrawing maybe 5, 6, or maybe even 7% of their portfolio. And if they haven't really properly taken into account the impact that inflation, as well as potential healthcare costs can have down the road, it can really impact their ability to have that longevity of their retirement plan. We also hear that many investors also want to know that on a month-to-month basis, or year-to-year basis at least, that they have some portion of their income, maybe not all of it, but some of it is predictable and sustainable.
Some very good points. Which leads me to ask, is there any one error that you see, that you commonly see with clients regarding their investments?
Outside of the era, which probably a lot of our viewers today probably don't experience, but you have the obvious one, which is the ostrich approach. That's I bury my head in the sand. I'm not going to deal with this. I'm going to just deal with it someday, not now. And that's not most people. I think most people inevitably have done a pretty good job, and they probably actually don't even need to reinvent the wheel. But maybe it's just making some slight tweaks or modifications to their plan. But I think the biggest error is really not knowing, Leslie, how much you need per month or per year to live in retirement.
Sure.
One of the exercises that we take our clients through that people find very effective, although it is a little bit of a homework assignment, is really going through your essential income expenses and really putting pen to paper and taking the time to go through and document, this is how much we need to cover our household expenses, this is our utilities. And as you add up each of those numbers, we have different categories. Here's our insurance cost. It allows you to at least visually say, okay, we know that essential income expenses, we need X. We always encourage clients to obviously build in a little bit of a cushion. And I'm personally a big advocate of obviously making sure that you still have your appropriate emergency fund. And I'm a big advocate of creating, for lack of a better term, maybe another bucket of money that is earmarked towards things that are really important to them in life, their passions, their hobbies. Maybe they want to golf in retirement. Maybe they want to travel with their family. Whatever the things that they've worked a lifetime to save for, I want to make sure that we've thought about that and that they can really take advantage of that. So I think, I also notice that people also underestimate what it will cost. I mean, if you think about the average boomer, they're probably going to work, give or take a few years, 40 years as a working adult. 5 days a week. Saturday and Sundays off, not everybody, maybe 3 to 6 weeks worth of vacation. And as a result of that, now we have to go to 7 Saturdays, which generally seems to be the most expensive day of the month, or week, excuse me. So I think sometimes people underestimate things in the early years. They sometimes take on projects, but all in all, it's just really about investing the appropriate time.
That sounds very good. You mentioned nuts and bolts a few minutes ago. The oldest boomers turned 65 in 2011. Do you have some nuts and bolts pointers for them in terms of investing? Sure.
Boomers, if you're born between 1946 and 64, have been categorized and lumped together for their entire life.
It's true.
And I think to answer this question appropriately, I'd like it, with your permission, to kind of break it into 3 segments. One would be the younger boomers, and I would characterize them as probably 10 plus years to retirement. The second would be that boomer group that is maybe 2 to 4, 5, 6 years away from retirement. They can see it, it's not there, but it's getting close. And then the third group would be the boomers who are either already retired maybe in the last year or two, or they're retiring this year. So with the younger boomers, focus is all about savings, putting as much money away as possible into their retirement plans. Many company-sponsored plans also have catch-up provisions for people who are over the age of 50. So it's really about maximizing what they can into their retirement plans. And if they're eligible, whether that's through a Roth IRA or an individual IRA, also taking advantage of not only putting the regular amount of contribution in, but taking that catch-up provision as well. For the boomers who can see retirement, they can smell it, but it's not quite there, it's really about their plan, Leslie. It's about, if they have a plan, just reevaluating it. Again, not reinventing the wheel, making some tweaks and modifications. If they don't have a plan, invest the time in a plan. Take into account they're probably going to have an active lifestyle in the early years of the retirement. Make sure you factor in inflation, healthcare costs, and really work closely with your financial professional to make sure that you've put together a plan that you think has the best chance of enduring a long-term success. For boomers who are retired or are retiring this year, goes back to our first question, emotions. A lot easier said than done. You have been saving for 40, maybe 45 years into something, and now for the first time in your life you're taking out. And if you're taking out and you see it going down due to market or performance, that can be very, very stressful for people. So it is imperative that this group of people work very closely with that financial professional to make sure that they've put together a strategy so that portfolio can endure. But it's really important that first 10 years that they get the income that they need.
Some important pointers there.
Yeah.
That leads me to ask, you must have a lot of questions about accessing one's money because people have different types of accounts.
Sure.
How do you advise in that regard?
Accessing usually, and I have a number of clients who are retiring this year, so the one question that we get along those lines, Leslie, is, Greg, does it make sense to start consolidating? And I think if your intentions are to make things a little bit simpler, to make sure you don't have overlap of your investments, it's certainly worthwhile to consider. In regards to the nuts and bolts of how do you get your money out, I think it's really personal choice. You could say, hey, Greg, we work well off of a monthly budget. I'd like to take things X amount a month, to help live our lifestyle in retirement. Someone else works off of a quarterly. I guess the only thing that we really encourage is to do something systematically, not kind of take a lump here, take a lump there, because this allows you not to worry about, am I taking money out the best time of the year or the best time of the week? But certainly you also want to make sure that if you have non-retirement money, so if you have cash or CD or non-retirement assets, that you work closely with your financial professional and probably tax professional to make sure that you're taking out the appropriate mix between non-retirement dollars and retirement dollars, because they are taxed differently. And many boomers also have the question around Social Security. Should I take it early? Should I take it at normal retirement? Should I defer it? There's a lot of situations that are involved here.
Sure.
If you're married, if you're divorced and were married for at least 10 years, there are some different reasons that you might want to look at some different scenarios. So the takeaway is, as you can see, there's a lot of moving parts. Work closely with your financial professional. And after a good, thorough conversation, you should be a little bit more clear on what makes the most sense for you.
A lot to think about.
Yeah.
We keep mentioning retirement. There must be clients that you have who say, Greg, I'm never going to retire. I'm just going to work until the end.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to such a person?
I say, good for you. I don't envision myself as being someone who's got the countdown to the day I can retire, even though it's many, many years from now. I think I have a handful of clients. We have a running joke where they say, I think next year is the year. Mm-hmm. I know it's not the year. Their spouse knows it's not the year. But it goes back to emotions. They want to know that they can. And as long as they're working because it's something that they enjoy, they still get stimulation out of it. It allows them maybe to do some extra things for probably not even themselves, but their children or grandchildren or things that are important to them. I think it's wonderful.
Do we need a new word for retirement?
I don't know if I have a new word. I did have the opportunity to see an economist speak about 4 years ago, and he actually broke retirement into like 10 or 12 year increments, and he called it the go-go, the slow-go, and the no-go. And the go-go was kind of, Leslie, the boomer who, in that first 10 or 12 years, very active lifestyle, working or not, doing a lot of traveling, doing a lot of hobbies and activities that are really, really important to them. That next 10 or 12 years, maybe mid-70s to mid-80s, that is the slow-go years. Maybe now I'm going to Florida for 2-3 months, or the Carolinas, or Arizona, whatever your preference is, and then I'm maybe spending the rest of my time up here in the Northeast. And then if you're fortunate enough to be around on the no-go years, those are the people in their mid-80s to late 90s, maybe now you've relocated, to a different community, and now maybe your family's coming to visit you as opposed to you going to see them. So I guess I don't have a particular phrase, but I think that a lot of boomers will experience, that, kind of cycle of living.
Are there any clients that come to mind that you would share with us little stories about?
I was actually with a client earlier today, and we had met for lunch, and I can't stress enough, and I talk so much about the emotions of things and the imperative role that it plays in the decision-making process, and we had a great conversation, and he's a wonderful guy, and all he cares about is making sure that his wife and his daughter are taken care of when he's gone someday, he's working, he's in his early 70s, and he's still working, and he's got a very important job, but I think the end of the rope is coming, and I think for me, just being able to have a nice open dialogue with him around, what's important, what are the drivers for him, what are the things that he needs to see so that ultimately he feels comfortable with the decisions that him and his wife come to. So he fits the mold of he's not retired, and he probably would go longer, although I think he's starting to think, I'm going to be 73 years old this year, I think I'm starting to slow down a little bit, and now it's just about putting the pieces of the puzzle together. One of the things that really resonated with him, though, is when I talked to him about saying, Stephen, I think that you should have a bucket of money, for lack of better terms, so that when things come up, so that him and his wife take their daughter on a trip to Bermuda, and they do it up very, very well. I said, I want you to be able to do that as long as you're healthy, as long as you can do that. I said, I don't want you to look at that as a cash flow expense. I want you to look at that as something as fun money, and the objective is that over the next 10 or 12 years, that money's gone because you earmarked it for enjoyment. So you don't have to worry about it, because if you take it away, it's going to impact your ability to live day to day. It's not. And that's one of the things that I really feel passionately about, and I always encourage people to do things while they're young and they're healthy and they have the ability to do those things.
Those buckets sound good.
Yeah.
So let's talk big picture. Are there some big picture bits of advice we can leave our audience with today?
Yeah, maybe just a few closing comments. One, first and foremost, invest in yourself. We've talked about a lot of things today. Just spend the time. Spend this time with yourself, your financial professional. You've worked hard to get where you are today. You want to make sure that you do the best that you can. The second is understand that you're going to put together a game plan. And like any game plan, it's going to change depending upon your life, depending upon the world and what's going on. And that's perfectly okay, and actually probably pretty normal. And thirdly, don't make this your 2013 resolution. Start now. Start this week, start next week, but start really, really soon. Because, if you think about it, people work so hard to accumulate what they have. You want to make sure that you invest the time to know that ultimately you can distribute the wealth that you've built in the most cost-efficient and effective manner, really, for you, and the well-being of your family.
Wonderful. I'm sure procrastination, by the way, is a powerful force.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is.
I can't thank you enough for all these insightful tidbits and bits of advice for our audience. It's really wonderful.
Great. Well, I appreciate you having me on this afternoon. I think the objective of any thing that we are involved in is hopefully each person in your audience can just take one idea, implement it, and it will make a difference in their life in the long term.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being with us this time on Boomer Being. See you next time.